All right. Hello, Albert's List, and welcome. We hope you're having a safe week out there with a combination now of COVID-19 and ongoing social challenges stemming from the George Floyd murder. As a job search community, we're committed to creating a safe environment where everyone is welcome. Today, we're doing another mock interview with CORY HIROMOTO of CareerShakers.com. CORY has been with us for the past 2 months and is a Fortune 500 recruiter, as well as an entrepreneur, a graduate of Santa Clara University, and a former management consultant. Over the past few months, he's spoken with marketers, software engineers, and designers. Today, we're venturing into a new area of sales. Joining him is Kristen Lee, an account executive with more than 5 years of professional experience in the tech industry. The rules of tonight's video are simple. I'll be going on mute here in a moment and turning off my video while CORY interviews Kristen for a job that she's pre-selected. All of you get to watch, offer your feedback, and ask your own interview questions while you learn about how to master a sales interview. CORY, welcome. Kristen, welcome as well. Over to you.
Thank you. And Albert, I guess before we lose you and you sign off, can you enable my screen sharing?
Yeah, that would probably be a good idea.
Yeah, forgot to do that in our prep call. We got sucked into a conversation about IKEA furniture. So
we did. We did.
Okay, perfect.
All right, wonderful.
Awesome.
There you
Well,
go.
thank you, everyone. I'm sure you all are either tired of my face or happy to see me again, one of the two. This is, I believe, week 7 or 8 of our mock interview series. We've covered different topics and like interview questions in terms of like how to get back into work if you've taken some time off. We've also talked about how to move from an individual contributor role into like a team manager role, and other different types of scenarios. So feel free to check out some of our previous recordings, or I will be checking the chat periodically during this live session. So feel free to put in your questions or comments, and also show some love and support for Kristen, who has bravely volunteered herself and put herself out there in front of potentially hundreds of you, not to freak her out too much. And so we would love to see some love for her in the chat and as well. I'll be kicking it over to Kristen now to kind of give her little elevator pitch-ish about herself in a non-interview setting, of course. Just maybe give some background about yourself, what you do, where you work, and then in terms of job hunting and searching, what types of companies or roles you're looking for. So if anyone in the audience knows someone or is potentially hiring, then that would be a great connection as well. So the stage is yours.
Okay, great. Thank you. My name is Kristen Lee. I am a sales professional. My most recent role is at Santa Clara as a commercial account executive. You may notice already on the resume that my end date is May 2020. If you don't know already, they went through a series of mass layoffs, which affected my role in particular because I am part of the small to medium-sized business segment, which is a little bit less profitable for the company. And currently I am searching an account executive role. I'm looking to venture into a mid-market role and start to sell a little bit more complex deals.
Oh, there we go. Perfect. Great little intro there. In terms of today's session, we're going to be doing a sample job description here for Zoom, which I'm sure everyone is very familiar with right now during COVID. It does say Tokyo, Japan. This is just an example job description. She is not interested in moving to Japan. So just wanted to throw that one out there. There will be no Japanese speaking during this mock session. Now, one thing I've started to do also is have our brave volunteers give a quick little introduction or overview of what the role is that they are applying for, or that they do in this case, just so folks at home who may not be familiar with this role or work in sales can kind of follow along and have some context. The good news is this is the first time we've had a job that I can actually understand, sales. And I'm sure a lot of you probably feel the same way. So Kristen, can you give the folks at home just a high level overview of kind of what an account executive does just in general?
Okay, great. So account executives can operate in different segments. So there's usually the commercial or the small to medium-sized businesses. There's usually a mid-market where you're selling to bigger companies. And then there's also enterprise account executives who sell to much larger corporations that you probably know the names of. And our job basically is to meet with different prospects, and this could be through Zoom or this could be through in-person type of sales. And our main objective is to teach them about what product we are selling, how it can solve their problems, and then we have the role of trying to close that sale.
Awesome. And this is for new and existing customers, correct?
Mostly for new customers. Some companies, like the one that I was working for, allowed me to upsell to existing companies. So it depends on the role itself, but for the most part, you're trying to get net new customers.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. So I was actually really excited about this week because it is sales, which means almost everybody will be able to follow along and totally understand what Kristen and I am talking about. And it's nothing too technical. So now we will dive into the mock interview itself. Just a quick recap. I will basically pretend to be an interviewer. I will ask a interview question to Kristen. She will answer it as if it is a regular interview. And then at the end, I will break, essentially give her feedback. And then she'll ask me questions and things like that. And then I'll also check the chat to see if you guys have follow-up questions or if you guys want me to ask Kristen another type of interview question for your own learnings. So without further ado, let's dive right in. So, and I will be referencing my questionnaire sheet here if anyone's wondering why I keep looking at this piece of paper. So, Kristen, why do you want to work for Zoom?
So I want to work for Zoom. First of all, I am an end user of Zoom even before COVID, happened and everybody started using Zoom for ways to connect with people. This has been something that I've used in the past 2 sales roles that I've had. And for me as a sales professional, the most important thing to me is being able to sell a product that I believe in and that I have experience using. And I've used other platforms as well that allow for us to do the same thing. But what sticks out to me is that Zoom is very user friendly. So I really enjoy the user interface and the user experience compared to some of the other products I've used before. So I feel that as a salesperson, I could sell with integrity and say, this really is the best product.
Awesome. And so how do you feel like your current experience today, and I'll pull up your resume for the viewers at home, matches or would be a really good fit for this role?
So from the job description, it was saying that they wanted somebody with experience who has sold to C-level executives. That's something that I've done in both of my past sales roles. So that's something that I'm comfortable with, is interfacing directly with decision makers. I also have a strong record of being able to hit or exceed quota, and I've done this since I was a sales development representative. I have a lot of experience negotiating and also executing more complex type of sales that involve different people in the sales process. So this could include people like finance. This could include some of the end users that are not necessarily the decision makers, but will influence the sale itself.
Okay. Now, on your resume here, I have noticed that you've been an account executive for a little under 2 years, and you've been working with commercial accounts for a little bit under a year as well. So why do you think you'd be really effective in this role here at Zoom?
Right. So this one is also a commercial account executive role. And usually that's another way of saying just smaller businesses, depending on how you define your territories. So that's something that I've been working with since the beginning of my career. I've been working with companies that are on the small to medium sized business segment. And it usually means that I can get directly to a decision maker and there's not a lot of people at play. So this is a very fast type of sales cycle. I believe that with my average sales cycle at my last company being 5 days or less, that this is something that I could bring also to this role here at Zoom.
Okay, great. So I'll end the practice scenario there. I did throw in like a combination of questions, like all the basic research questions. This is the first time I've done them in rapid succession, mostly because Kristen was nailing them kind of one after another. So I tried to make it harder and harder and, continue to build on top of her previous answers. Overall, I do think she did a really, really good job. The first question was a kind of a gimme, right? Like, why do you want to work here? She did a really good job of incorporating both some personal research as well as tying it back to the role itself. When it does come to sales, obviously you would be much more effective if you do believe in the product overall. And she is a prior user even before COVID. So huge selling point there. And then when I asked her to walk through her experience, she was able to pick up on the cue that I wanted her to tie it back to the job description and kind of tailor it to what her experience does that matches what they're looking for. So she did a very good job there. And then in terms of the third question, which I was kind of basing off of the job description itself, it does require 5 years of account executive experience, right? And I was basically pointing out that Kristen on paper looks like she only has about less than 2 years or close to 2 years. And only one of that is directly related to commercial, as far as I could tell. But she did a really, really good job on actually driving the conversation back to her overall experience and how she actually does have basically her entire career has been working with commercial or small and medium-sized businesses. So she was able to essentially counter my argument in a very effective way, and it was very, very succinct. You'll notice that a lot of her answers weren't very, very long, right? Even the first question about like, why do you want to work here? That could be an entire novel or story, and she was able to do it in less than under a minute. So overall timing wise as well, really, 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 really good, honestly. Um, if anything, it's not like a fault on her because I'm not the actual person recruiting for this role, and this is imaginary. She's not interested in this position currently. Just get a little bit more context about the role itself, right? Like maybe it's not as straightforward as the job description may say, and then that way she'll have a little bit more context of what she should pull into her story about her background. But other than that, yeah, no real improvements, and very well, very well done. So round of
Thank you.
applause there. We'll see if there's anything in the chat. Not yet. Okay, cool. So we got the warm-up questions out of the way. Let's get into some of the harder ones. So, Kristen, how would you describe yourself as a sales professional?
Okay. I would say that a couple things that I pride myself in is that I'm very coachable. And the reason I choose to say that first is because sales is something that you constantly have to hone your skills in. It's not something that once you're good, you're going to stay there. There's always going to be a customer that throws you off with an objection, or there's going to be something along in the sales process that's going to be new for you. So I think that it's really important to place myself in a position to constantly get feedback from my manager and to find ways to improve my skills.
Can you walk me through an example of something that you've had to learn recently?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, so I mentioned that I did get the chance to sell to existing customers. So at Samsara, we have 6 different product lines that you could sell across. And so let's say one of my customers has already purchased GPS tracking, but they now are coming to me and asking me about cameras. One thing that I tend to do to sort of shortcut the process is I would just make it highly transactional, and I would tell them, okay, this is the cost of cameras. Let me know how many you need, and I will send you the checkout link. And what I realized is, although most of the time those deals do close, sometimes the customer will still take a while getting back to you. And I realized that treating these existing customers with the same attention that you would treat new customers is important. So what I should have done was I should have gone to this customer and said, hey, I heard you're interested in cameras. What got you interested? What sort of issues are going in your business that are leading you to talk to us about cameras now? For example, if they said they got into an accident, I could ask them, well, okay, how much did this accident cost you? And in turn, I can, just develop a strong business driver so that when they do ghost me and I can't get the sale across the line, I have a lot of collateral that I can use to then go back to them and ask them, hey, don't you want to solve these problems that you listed?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then what's some of the impact that it's had for you ever since you've made these changes for upsells?
I'm able to shorten my sales cycle, and I'm able to get a higher percentage of closing those deals.
Okay, cool. So we'll end the scenario there. So this one was interesting, right? It was like a hidden star technique question, behavioral question, essentially, but it was disguised as kind of like a research-based question, which was like, how would you describe yourself? It was an interesting attribute to immediately start with, coachability, and she made herself very vulnerable, right, by kind of either it could have been purposeful, but she kind of acknowledged that she made a mistake recently, right, in terms of the ability to upsell certain customers. which is, according to the job description, a minimum requirement for the role itself. So depending on how that could be interpreted, right? It could be seen as a good thing that, oh, she's, she can acknowledge her mistakes and work on improving them. Or it could kind of be like that, what's your greatest weakness? And then you admit something that's like critical to the role. And then they're kind of like, I don't know. I don't know about Kristen, right? So that's just something you may want to be aware of. And then the other thing too is, with my follow-up questions, those were ideally, right, if you could give me some of that context without me asking, that would have been like a really good answer. Even with my follow-ups though, you did a very good job of answering those questions. I think if you could give me a little bit more data as well in terms of like upsell percentage. I know earlier you did mention that your average deal cycle is around 5 days, but like maybe you could have been like, well, before this for upsells, my average deal cycle was 11 days because customers would take really long time to get back to me. And then after I started treating them like new customers and improving, the customer experience, my upsell deal cycle is shortened to 7, right?
Yeah.
And given where Zoom is right now, right, high growth, that's definitely going to be something if you were applying for this role, they would definitely want to be listening for, right? Folks who've been operating in fast growing companies with probably a lot of demand, right? And so short sales cycles is going to be something that they're absolutely going to like salivate over in terms of wanting to hire someone. And I guess just to circle back to, I forgot to give Kristen credit for this earlier, but in her previous example, she also included numbers and metrics into her overall pitch, right? She talked about her sales cycle being 5 days and a few other things. And she weaved that in nicely without it feeling like forced or awkward. It was a really nice story. So she was able to basically make a statement and then show with data, which all tech companies love, and support her overall claims about her abilities, which was really, really good. Any questions so far in terms of like feedback or how my questions are worded and things? From you, Kristen, any questions?
Oh, for me, I thought you were waiting for other people. No, I appreciate that. I think that you're right. Being very metrics driven is important in an interview. And instead of coachability, I think maybe I could have shaped it into saying like, I am constantly seeking out growth opportunities or ways to improve.
And I think another, general just attribute that they look for, right, is a sense of competition or competitiveness, right? And that's a fairly safe answer to give, right? It's not negative,
Right.
nor is it too arrogant, right? I think that's just a natural thing that most companies would want in an account executive. So this that could also be something you may want to play with.
Okay.
Albert has a practice question for you.
Okay.
Have you ever had to sell a product to a customer who had a really difficult time understanding the product? What did you do?
Yes. So typically, and I mentioned this on my resume too, typically I'm selling to the decision maker, but at my last company, so Samsara basically sells, fleet technology to improve driver safety and also to improve fleet efficiency. A lot of times they're more blue collar type of people, so they don't really understand the importance of technology. In fact, I've had to teach people how to even get on Zoom because it would be their first time doing a video conference. So I would say that, yes, I have dealt with a lot of people who might not really understand what our product is. I think it's my job really as a sales professional to be able to understand where their need is, because first I have to be able to qualify them and make sure that our solution is going to solve their problems. So for me to be able to ask a lot of questions and understand where their pain points are, and then to be able to describe to them and see if they are understanding the product is all part of the day-to-day. One example of this is I was selling a GPS solution to somebody, and I asked them, what got you interested? They said, well, I just want to know where my guys are. And that's a common thing that we get, which is not going to tell me much because GPS can be such a broad term. So what I had to do was really understand what they did for their business. I could tie it into other customers look to us to solve X, Y, and Z. Does any of that apply to you? And by really pushing questions back to them, I'm able to understand their need and see, guide them with questions that can help them get to thinking what they really need.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. And then the end result of the conversation was?
So the end result is once I understood not just that they needed to know where their guys are, but why it was so important, I got to understand that, okay, this person doesn't necessarily trust his employees. He's looking for a way to be able to verify their trip history or to be able to get a better feel for why fuel usage is so high. And so I was able to tie those back into different things that we offered so that I could show him that this is a solution for all the problems that he listed. Even if I didn't go into the super technical portions of it, I kept it very high level, but I was able to show him that I was taking time to understand him. So I come off more credible when I tell him I have a solution for him.
And did he end up purchasing?
I don't remember because this happens all the time, but for the most part, I would say a lot of my customers at least agree to the next meeting, which is to talk about pricing and to talk about how we could get those units out to them.
Okay, cool. So this was basically a hidden star technique question. And so that's just why I asked for the result. You did a very good job walking through ST and A. Just needed to wrap it up with the most important thing, right? Which is what ultimately happened. And I think too, one thing to note also for anyone who is applying for a sales role, the result doesn't always, in fact, it shouldn't always just be, and then I closed the deal. Right, because if you say that for every single answer, it kind of gets old after a while, and so you need to find other great accomplishments or wins to highlight, other than the fact that yes, I closed the deal and I met quota. So that's always just something you should keep in the back of your mind. So great question, Albert. Really, really pushing folks. Nina Seth has an interesting question. And I'm sure actually Kristen might be better to answer this. Have people transferred or transitioned, I guess, from marketing to sales? Have you seen anyone do that successfully?
You know what? It's usually the other way around from my experience. I see a lot of
That's what I was
people
gonna say. Yeah.
who start out in sales and then want to go over to the marketing side. But if you're at a company where there's a lot of flexibility, maybe like a company that's more startup, then I'm pretty sure if you're doing a good job and you can list reasons why you want to move over to sales, then yeah, you would probably start out as an SDR or an ADR, which is a basic level where you're helping account executives. And then if you prove yourself, then you can move up.
Yeah, I was actually going to say the same thing as Kristen. Nina, I've actually seen it more common to go the other way, just because of the interaction and interfaces between sales and marketing, because they do work very closely together, whether that's like for demand generation, lead generation, running certain campaigns, partnering on events, et cetera, and then they usually get bit by the marketing bug and they realize that they love it, and then they may do that transition over. And also sales does sometimes have a burnout rate, just given the nature of the role and how high stress it is. So that's also why I've seen a lot of people move from sales into marketing, but very, very rarely have we seen it go the other way. Okay, Navneet has another practice question, which I will get to after this one. I love the interaction and all the feedback, everyone. So please keep it coming. And Kristen does have some interviews potentially coming up, so this is only going to help her. So keep them coming.
Okay.
Alrighty. So Kristen, earlier in your overview about your background, you talked about complex deals, which is a great segue for me because I was actually going to say, can you talk to me and walk me through your most complex deal that you had to do at Samsara?
Okay. So Samsara, we have a lot of competitors in the space where we are trying to move people from their platform over to ours. So one of the more complex type of deals involves a contract buyout. And what that means is if somebody is currently in contract and locked in for, say 1 or 2 more years before they can actually sign over to our platform, it's not a reason for us not to close the deal anyway. So our job is to overcome that by asking them, okay, what would it cost you if you were to terminate your contract today and move over to us? Once we have that buyout figure, I can go to the finance team and I can present the contract. I can present, some other documentation that they require, and then I can go back to the customer and say, I'm willing to buy out a certain percentage of this contract. And what I would have to do, obviously, is I have to then work with finance. I have to work with the customer. They have to work with their vendor. And I also might have to get some sort of managerial approval so that I can extend a certain discount. And so I would say those are some of the more complex type of deals, is when there's a certain very specific situation for the customer where I have to do a little bit extra work and get everything teed up for them before I can sign the deal.
Okay, can you walk me through an example of one of those complex deals with a contract buyout?
Yeah, so I had a customer who was ready to sign and then found out that he was actually under contract for another 2 years or so. He came back to me and told me that he might not be able to purchase, but he'll keep us in mind for when his contract expires. And what I did was I went back to him and I said, okay, well, I know that you mentioned you like our platform a lot better than your competitors. These are all the things that you told me you didn't like about them. So here's what I'm going to try to do. I will go to my manager. I will try to get buyout approval, but I will need for you to commit and say that you can get this within X amount of time. Usually we give them like maybe a week or so to try to contact their vendor and get out of that contract. We're willing to buy out that. So this is a check that we send them. This doesn't mean that they can't sign with us. It just means that once they sign with us, we have to get everything in order so that finance can then approve the check that's sent out to them. So what I did basically was I didn't give up on the fact that I could still close this deal. I just had to get a little bit more information from them so that I can go to my manager on behalf of my customer, basically go to bat for them. And then my manager obviously pushes back on me saying we need commitment from the customer. So I'm kind of executing on behalf of both sides so that we can get this win.
Okay, and then ultimately, what was the result of that deal?
So for the most part, my buyouts are pretty successful unless there's any reason that we can't buy out their contract. For example, if the buyout amount is just too ridiculous, I'm usually able to win the deal by, going to both parts of the equation and being able to, fight for both sides.
Mm-hmm. And I would imagine though that the existing vendor is probably also going to try and fight to keep that customer from transferring over to you, right? So
that happened before, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm sure that there's another level of negotiation that happens after that, right? Where you're like, look, I can give you this check for your buyout, and this is the discount in which I would offer. And then they would counter you by saying, well, actually, I did talk to that vendor, and they are actually even willing to give us an additional discount if we choose not to leave, right? So what do you do in those scenarios?
So, I mean, I just kind of level with the customer, like, is price the only thing that you need in order to stay with your vendor? Because you did mention these certain things that you didn't like about them. The other thing I would ask is more details, like, are they making you sign another 3-year contract in order to get that price? Or are they just giving it to you free of any sort of commitment? Like, all of those things are important considerations from a buyer's point of view. So those are the type of questions that I'm going to have the buyer explore before they just go off of price. If it's just pricing that is their main consideration, I'm not always going to be somebody that's selling the cheapest thing, right? Because you get what you pay for. So what I want to do in those situations is also identify certain characteristics that they're looking for when they're looking for a new product. So price aside, were there any issues with their current vendor that our solution can solve? And if so, they should be willing to pay a little bit extra for those additional functionality.
Okay, cool. So yeah, we'll finish the practice question there. I think overall it was good once I kind of brought you back to the initial question itself and was able to probe you. Just make sure that you are able to share examples if they are prompting you to give an example. And then, of course, make sure you always talk about the most important thing, which is the result itself.
Yeah.
And then the other follow-up question, which I would have asked if we probably had more time, right, in this specific scenario, would have been, well, for example, in your space, right, you are operating in the commercial segment, which is
Mhm.
small businesses, right? So for them, budget will primarily be a main driving factor if they don't have a large IT budget, right? So how are you going
Mhm.
to convince them to maybe, go over budget in certain cases, right? Even though
Mhm.
your product may be better, provide better quality, you do get what you pay for, but sometimes, they're just limited by the overall budget, but it doesn't mean that the deal is unwinnable, right?
Mhm.
So that would have been like another follow-up question I would have asked you
Mhm.
subsequent that, but I'm sure you have
Right.
another example teed up and ready to go. So just I guess wanted to give some folks the insights in terms of like what an interviewer would be thinking, even during the interview itself, because I started with one question in mind, which I basically just wanted to understand overall it like quite literally the complexity of some of her deals because when you are dealing with SaaS products and in her role, you do have to work with a lot of different functions in order to get really complex deals closed, right? And I
Mhm.
feel like that's kind of what separates an average AE from a great one, is the ability to navigate all these different challenges in a timely fashion, right? Because the longer you take to close a deal, you may end up losing your customer over time. But you also have to do what's right by your company as well, right? You can't, obviously make you take a loss just to close a deal, essentially. So, okay, cool. Any questions in the chat? Okay, let's see. Navneet has a practice question for you.
Okay.
By the way, do you need like a water break or anything like that? I feel like we're going rapid
I'm
fire.
good. I have water here.
Okay. This is a good one. Navneet says, what is one thing that you don't want in your next job, which you experienced at your last job or Samsara?
That's a good question. I would say Samsara was kind of experimenting with a lot of different technologies at the time when I was there. So we did a lot of migrations from one software over to another, and there's always a learning curve that's associated with that. So I feel that the next company that I work for, I would like for them to be a little bit more established in the sort of technology that they have in place. And that's not to say I'm not open to technology that makes my life easier, because that's always going to be something that's constantly coming up, and that's something that we should explore. But I would say that we kind of went through a lot of migrations, towards the end of the quarter when our focus should have been on closing deals. So I would say just the timeline for when we decide to onboard different types of technology into our tech stack is something that is could be better executed.
Well, Kristen, here at Zoom Video Technologies, we are a relatively small and fastly growing company.
Mm-hmm.
As you probably know, with COVID-19, we've had an increase in users and
Mm-hmm.
sales, et cetera, et cetera. So we are actually going to have to start scaling our internal tools and technologies. And for example, right now, we are in the middle of transitioning over to another CRM.
Mm-hmm.
So is this going to be an issue for you? Because it was something you really didn't like at your last company.
I mean, like I said, it's not something that I think we shouldn't invest in. Obviously, if there is something that is going to replace a current vendor that is better, that's not for me to say, right? But I would just say that the execution process could be a little bit easier. So, for example, timing it so that we have the bandwidth to actually pick up on these business solutions. Because what I've seen is sometimes when you try to get new technology at the end of the quarter when our priority is on closing deals, a lot of the users like myself tend to just push that off for, okay, I'll learn this next week or something, while this week is supposed to be my focus, being on closing deals. So I would just say being able to understand how all the different business departments work and what their number one priority is, and then having schedules for when you roll out new programs would be important.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so this is a relatively tricky question overall. And I think that's why Navneet said one interviewer recently asked him this question, and I assume he probably had a difficult time answering it, as I think a lot of people would. The trick to answering this question well is picking the right, I guess, quote unquote, problem to share at the beginning, because then depending on what you say, right, there's going to be certain follow-up questions like I had pretended to ask Kristen here, which may actually end up being true given where Zoom is in the current marketplace right now, right? And so then it's always hard to kind of like, oh, well, actually, I was really just kidding. I really love different technologies, and I just totally understand, when you have to transition, right? So, I think the key to answering this one correctly is trying to pick something that kind of lands safely in the middle. Obviously, you wouldn't want to bash your current employer. That's also one route that they definitely don't want you to start going down, right? Which is like, oh, well, let me tell you all the bad things that I don't like about Samsara and why I'm looking for a new role, right? And this also applies for the why do you want to work here question. It shouldn't be immediately saying like all the bad things that are currently happening at your current company or with your boss or whatever, and that's why it's driving you to look for new opportunities. Very similarly, you shouldn't have that approach here. I think Kristen's answer is actually probably relatively safe. It just depends on how she's going to support her answers in certain follow-up questions, like I had there, right? So if anything, the counter argument could have been something like, well, one thing I would have loved to have done last time at my previous company was to be involved as a potential super user or test user. And then I would actually be able to give them immediate feedback as we're building certain test environments. And that way I could also kind of control the launch schedules. Ideally for me, it would be better if we didn't launch during quarter end. And I believe as an account executive, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Tying it back to the business priorities, and certain other things. I feel like that would have been a relatively safe answer. And there's really no other counter argument to that, right? Like, so that's how I would have gone about answering it. But overall, good job, Kristen.
Thank you. Thanks for the feedback.
Yeah. Christine asks, what about going into sales in a new company with a marketing career? Yeah, I mean, still, I haven't seen very many cases of people going the reverse, but to Kristen's point earlier, and this is what she did even in her career, right, which is very common. If you did want to transition into sales, it probably would be relatively simple, I would say, between whether it's your existing company or an outer company, if you are willing to kind of hit a mini reset button, and you would essentially start as an SDR or sales development representative. Or so if you're willing to kind of do that, one of the great things about sales is there's not actually a certain, I would say, technical requirement like for other roles. That's why they look to employ almost anyone from any type of major directly out of school into these SDR type positions. So I would say the barrier to entry is actually pretty manageable. Hopefully that's helpful. If not, Christine, feel free to shoot another comment in the chat, and we'll be here to answer. All right, man, I feel like we've gotten a lot of really good questions today. Okay, I was going to ask you a question about how you upsell, but we actually naturally already covered one of those, so we'll skip that one.
Okay.
Okay, so let's try some hypothetical questions.
All right.
So, Kristen, imagine I hired you here at Zoom, and it's not for any region in Japan. Let's just say it's for the Pacific Northwest.
Okay.
So your territory would be Washington, Seattle, and what else is up there? I don't know. One of those other states right next to Seattle, besides Portland. So imagine I hired you into that role. How would you get familiar with your territory on day one?
I think the best thing that you can do when you first join a company as a sales executive is to observe other sales executives. So if there's somebody with a similar territory or somebody who had previously worked in that territory, I would obviously want to set some time aside with them and go to them as a resource so I can learn sort of the things that they might know. The other thing also is, it's still a numbers game at the end of the day. For me to just hit the phones and experiment, come up with different talk tracks, see which one is the most effective with those prospects would be very helpful, because then I know for myself what works and what doesn't. So I would say it's a combination of learning from other people as well as just trying things out. It's day one, so I have the rest of the month or the rest of the quarter to figure things out.
Okay. And then how would you go about starting to identify new potential customers or leads?
So when I was an SDR, I was in charge of being able to generate new leads, especially in an outbound role where I was at QuickTime. One of the main things that I was in charge of was looking at certain types of customers that I could potentially sell to. So I would do that through LinkedIn. I would use their different search filters in order to search similar companies to what we already sell into. And then I would also use Zoom Info, which is another technology that you can use to search people and find different leads. And again, you're using search filters in order to do that. And then I would also just look into Salesforce, where you record a lot of your customer data. And if there's anybody that we previously engaged with, but I could see that they turned us down because of certain feature requests or because of pricing, I would like to re-engage those, because I know companies come out with new features. They come out with different pricing all the time. So it would be good to revisit some of those and try to re-engage with those prospects.
Okay. All right. So we'll end this was the feedback time. I never
Okay.
have a good way to like say we're done. I should get one of those things that like clap in the movies where it's like end scene or action or whatever. So feedback wise, this one is actually interesting because it can open up a lot of different doors and can really give you the opportunity to show your depth of knowledge and skills. Almost any hypothetical question will essentially do that. So right away, I would say maybe you should think about asking potential questions to gather information from me before
Okay.
you start to immediately dive in and walk through your day one plan.
Okay.
Second is trying to structure your answer around certain ideas and themes for me to follow along with. Your first half of the answer when you're talking about your day one plan, that's pretty, I would say, standard, right? Like see if
Mm-hmm.
anyone has done the role before, observe people, and then get on the phones, right? I don't really need a
Mm-hmm.
structure for that. But when I'm talking or asking you about how you would identify new customers, that's when I would
Mm-hmm.
like to see at least as an AE or an account
Mm-hmm.
executive, right? Like what is your overall plan and strategy?
Right.
And so maybe you should bucket it first by like, well, step one is research, right? Where do I normally do
Mm-hmm.
research? Zoom info, LinkedIn. I'm trying to find my
Mm-hmm.
key stakeholders and buyers, right? Second, I would want to make sure I have, I don't know, you have to get, I don't know anything about sales roles, but like contact information or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
Yeah.
Third, I want to, talk to my cross-functional partners and figure out who within Zoom I'm going to be interacting with the most and understanding certain processes like
Mm-hmm.
finance or marketing, right? Maybe there's some uh, existing lead generation or marketing campaigns that are currently running that I need to be brought up to speed on or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
right? Something like
Right.
that. Or maybe I find out that there is none of that. And then I will want to identify who in marketing is my point of contact to start working with. Or maybe I start to talk to my SDRs first, right? And understanding what their, pipeline and process looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Also, one thing that I would have loved to hear is, some unique strategies that
Mm-hmm.
you would bring to the table as an account executive, right? A lot of these steps in which you mentioned, I feel like almost every candidate will say, right? Like, how would you
Right.
find new customers? Oh, I go to Zoom Info, I'd go to LinkedIn, and then I get on the phone,
Mm-hmm.
right? But if every candidate says the same thing, then how are they going to know who's the best, right? Like, what makes Kristen an amazing AE? That part I wasn't able to kind of gather from your answer. And so I would have loved to hear like your unique approach or
Mm-hmm.
something you do that's a little bit more creative that has worked for you at your previous companies or what you learned as an SDR,
Mm-hmm.
et cetera, right? Or
Okay.
maybe you play into the fact that you did a whole bunch of research about Zoom and you know their product and the audience or the demographic. And I also gave you Pacific Northwest for a reason, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there should have been something you could have pulled in or utilized just from that territory alone. Right.
Right. Okay. That makes
Cool.
sense.
Any questions so far on that one from you, Kristen? Sorry, I keep forgetting that there's
No.
an,
Yeah.
an
No, that's
imaginary third
great.
person here. That's like,
Yeah, that's great. It's a good reminder. Just bring a little bit more structure to my answer, think of something unique, and then also think about, the specific territory that you gave me and what I could tie back into that.
yeah, yeah. And I guess in general for interviewing tips at home for or people at home, they craft or write or say questions in a certain way to give you certain context for a reason or to
Hmm.
uncover something about your skill set, right? So just make
Right.
sure you're mindful of all these key hints, I guess, people may give you in how the
Mhm.
question is worded.
Okay.
Awesome. Right, we don't have anything new in here. So I have just one more practice question for you, and then we'll go to the chat and see if anyone has anything else for you or I.
Okay.
So let's just do a bit of a sales role play here. Imagine
Okay.
you are a real estate agent, right? And you are
Okay.
doing uh, I guess, an assessment or an initial meeting with me as a potential home buyer here in
Okay.
the Bay Area. Okay.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and start this scenario in terms of how you would go about assessing my needs and convincing me to be a client of yours.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. Hey, Corey, how's it going?
Hi, Kristen. It's going very, very well. I'm super excited right now. I've heard the market is really opportune right now for buyers for the first time here in the Bay Area, and
Yeah.
hopefully I'm looking to purchase a home this year.
Okay. Sounds good. Are you in a position where you are ready to buy, or do you have some more questions right now for me?
Oh, I mean, if you're asking, do I have the funds ready and available to purchase? I
Hmm.
do, yes. My
Okay.
wife and I are super excited to buy our first home.
Okay. Great. And so it sounds like you and your wife are the main decision makers in this.
Hmm.
Do you have any kids or anybody else who would be involved in wanting to see the house?
No, but we are planning on having probably 2 children,
Okay.
and we will, but that's not going to be for a few years.
Okay. Got it. Yeah. I feel like that's pretty common in the Bay Area to kind of put that off for a little bit. So, what brings you to the Bay Area? Where are you guys from?
I'm from Hawaii originally,
Okay.
and this is all true, by the way. I'm from Hawaii originally, and I came here for college, and
Okay.
then I stayed here and worked, and I love it here. I feel like this is a really good place for me to buy a house.
Okay. And where do you want to reside in the Bay Area? There's like a different vibe for, San Francisco, and then there's East Bay, South Bay, North Bay.
Yeah, actually, I was hoping that you could kind of give me some insights, like what should I be thinking about? I mean, this is my first time
Mm-hmm.
buying a home, so what are some
Mm-hmm.
key things that I should be, factoring in when I'm trying to buy my first house?
Okay, great. Well, one thing that you mentioned already is that you are looking to grow your family eventually. And so, if you plan to stay somewhere for a couple of years or so, I would definitely recommend somewhere where you could have a bigger house with a little bit more area to have the kids run around in. Maybe something with a yard would be nice. But have you kind of thought of what you kind of want? Like, are you looking for a backyard, a pool? Like, is there any requirements for any of that? This could be like
A backyard
garage,
would be
parking
a
lot.
backyard would be nice, like
Hmm.
room for a garden, maybe. I don't need a pool though. Actually, in fact, I don't
Okay,
want a pool.
you don't
The
want a
maintenance
pool.
fees
Okay,
and things like that. Yeah, I do not
yeah.
want a pool.
Okay, sounds good. So sounds like a backyard and a garden would be good. Enough rooms for your children. And then what about your commute? Is there any considerations to your commute time?
Yes. So currently, I have the flexibility to work from home. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why I'm pretty open to a lot of different places. My
Right.
wife works in Cupertino,
Okay.
and so we would like to keep the commute at like a reasonable distance, maybe like 30 minutes one way.
Okay. Sounds good. And have you looked at any houses yet
No.
that you like? Okay.
Mm-mm.
Okay. So I'd be happy to show you a couple of listings here, and then you can let me know what you like and don't like, and I am confident that we will be able to find something that works for you. When are you free for us to showcase that?
Oh, I'm free next week or whatever.
Okay,
Next week.
sounds good. Let's do it. Let's do next week, same time.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. Thank you, Corey.
Okay, cool. So, end scene or whatever
Okay.
it's called. So obviously she's not going to be selling any real estate or anything like that. This role play basically is to understand how she does her, what is the official terminology you guys use for this? Qualification stage? Is that what
Yeah,
it's
like
called?
discovery. We
Yeah,
kind of try to
discovery.
understand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then, so I was just trying to understand, like what her, I guess, line of questions would be to help me understand and figure out my pain points as a customer. And then I wanted to see if she would be able to kind of turn it around, right? And offer her solutions to essentially
Mhm.
help me solve some of my problems or issues. I kind of even made it a little bit easier by saying, I don't really know what I want. Like, you should tell
Mhm.
me what I should be looking for. And
Mhm.
that was something that I was looking for you to kind of build more on
Mhm.
overall. And then, but that's essentially like what I was looking for overall. And it was meant to put you in like a bit of an uncomfortable situation. I didn't want it to be something that you've done before, because then it would
Yeah.
just kind of be scripted. And I'm sure you already have those. What did you call it earlier? Sales something,
Um,
or like
I don't know what you're referring to, but yes, there is like a certain qualification framework. So
yeah, like
we
BANT
try
or
to,
something, right?
yeah, so like budget, make sure
Mm-hmm.
that all the decision makers are present, and then see what your timeline is. So that's how we kind of qualify if something deserves our attention.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, cool. But yeah, that's pretty much what the question was overall, able to hopefully suss out. And maybe you'll get something similar and fun like that. Maybe there's no like sell me this pen type things, but
Albert was saying there might be. I was
yeah.
very prepared for the pen question though.
um, oh, okay. This is actually, I like this one from Albert. So he does have a question for
Okay.
you. Name a product that is marketed poorly and how you would sell it better.
Hmm. That's a good question. Um, can this be a service? Can I go down
Hmm.
that route?
Hmm.
Okay. So this is actually speaking from my own experience is I did work at a CPA firm before where they were very, very proud of the fact that all of their business came from word of mouth. And so I would say in that situation, I didn't feel that at the time, but when I look back now that I've been in the tech industry and I see that marketing is such a huge play for getting people to visit your website or come to you for business. I would say that that particular firm that I worked for probably could have done a little bit more marketing in that sense. They were able to secure a lot of different customers just from word of mouth, but I would say it never hurts to better market your business and appeal to the masses.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, interesting question, Albert. I think if it was a real scenario or like a real interview, it would have actually been a really great opportunity for you to tie that back into the fact that you were applying for the commercial role,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because as a small CPA firm, they probably literally focus on small and medium-sized businesses
Mm-hmm.
locally. And so if you could tie that back into like, well, from what I've seen in my experience as a commercial account executive over the last 1.5 years, I've
Mm-hmm.
noticed certain, marketing or branding events have been a really big hit with SMB customers versus,
Mm-hmm.
medium-sized businesses.
Right.
Certain, X, Y, and Z marketing campaigns have produced the most amount of qualified leads for me,
Mm-hmm.
et cetera, et cetera. But
Right.
other than that, I don't, I think that was a pretty comprehensive answer. Oh, Albert has another one. If you could sell anything, what would the product be and why?
Geez, I don't want to be tied to like a specific thing, but I will say that it's important for me that the product seems to differentiate itself from other competitors. Like I mentioned earlier when we were talking about Zoom, is that I've had a lot of experience working with a lot of platforms. So that's why I could speak to Zoom from a personal standpoint that I like that platform above the other ones that I've experienced. So for me, I would say product differentiation is important. And then it's also important to me to know that the product roadmap for each of these is taking into account customer feedback. So you hear a lot of things from customers like, I don't want to buy your product because of this. And then you want to take all of that information and relay it back to the product team. And then when they do their product updates, if they take that into consideration, it makes it really easy for us to tell our customers how fast we're innovating and how we can now meet their needs. So it's more just the combination of product differentiation as well as product roadmap for me.
Oh, that was a very good answer. One thing I was waiting or making sure that you wouldn't say is something like, "Oh, I would love to, sell a product that's a market leader or that's, number one in their space or something like that." Um, those are always kind of traps, right? Because then it's like,
Mhm.
oh, well, if the company you're at right now is not that, then you kind of shut yourself in the foot. And even if they are,
Mhm.
right, then they're just going to say, well, she only wants to work here because she knows that it'll be easy, right? It's easy to make
Mhm.
sales and hit your goals when you're already number one, right?
Right.
But luckily, she didn't even go down that route, and she talked more about what actually is tied to what her role does actually currently, right? As an account exec, I'm sure you do get a lot of that, both solicited and unsolicited feedback from
Mhm.
your customers about what they like and don't like, and then you probably have to give feedback to either the marketing team or product manager, et cetera, et
Mhm.
cetera. So yeah, that was a really good answer. She tied it back into her role perfectly. Alrighty. And that was perfect timing too, because we're near the top of the hour. I don't see anything else new in the chat, but if you guys do have any other questions or tricky interview scenarios or tough questions that you've gotten in your interviews and want advice on, feel free to comment even after this video is over and then just tag me or Albert in it, and then we'll do our best to kind of give you our advice on how to answer those questions. But that's all that I had. Thank you so much, Kristen, for volunteering and putting yourself through all of this torture for the pleasure of our audience here on a Monday. Albert, that is all that I oh, and quick plug, I guess, for myself. If you guys do want more advice and stuff, I have a quick little YouTube channel. It's just Career Shakers, all one word. So feel free to check that out. All right, Albert, I'm all done.
You have the best YouTube title cards. It's actually pretty funny to look at.
Thank you. I've been trying with
Did you
different
pose
ones.
those yourselves with selfies or?
I do, yeah. I stand in front of the camera and I take like 50 of these different photos with different facial expressions.
Yeah, yeah, wonderful. So Christine asks, will this be available for replay to go over the questions again? Yeah, we'll be keeping it here, and we may also, depending on the permission of Kristen, also publish it to YouTube, to our YouTube channel, so you could view it there as well. So yeah, thank you both again. I know Corey has already put out his thanks. Appreciate both of your time, and for those of you watching, I hope you also were able to learn something and spend some of your time here this evening productively. And perhaps you can also apply it to your job search, especially for those who are applying for sales and account executive type roles. The rest of our week this week is empty calendar-wise, so we wish you the best of luck as you pursue your professional interests. We'll be back next week with another mock interview with Christine Danner, a marketing professional with a background in nonprofits, agency PR, and retail. Before then, we'll see you in the community with your introductions, advice, and success stories. Until then, take care of yourself, stay on the grind, and good luck. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.